Welcome back to Classroom Horror Stories. This week we're talking about lunchroom stories. So grab a comfy blanket, your dog, some snacks, and buckle up. My son thought he grabbed a can of root beer and put it in his lunchbox. Soda isn't allowed, but who needs rules in 4th grade? It was a beer. He really said no rules apply. Many years ago, my grandmother was a cook in a country school back when the cooks made all the food. My cousin, a 3rd grader at the school, was in love with the most beautiful girl. His words. He wooed her in the cafeteria line. You like those cookies? I can get you more. It seems Grandma could be charmed into slipping him an extra cookie or two. It must have worked because my cousin and the most beautiful girl have been married for 36 years. That's really cute. A kindergartner wasn't eating his lunch. The teacher asked about it during an after-school meeting. Older sister was translating for Mom as Mom didn't speak English. Turns out Mom always hand-fed him. At 5 years old, he'd never fed himself. So when it came to lunchtime at school, he didn't know what to do. Kind of in the same vein here, a parent came to school every single day until the school put a stop to it to spoon feed her daughter like a baby. She would even put her hand on the back of her daughter's head and tip it back so she could pour milk down her throat. This child was completely capable of feeding herself. I had a kid who at almost the end of the day we realized was only wearing one shoe. After searching the classroom, the yard, and the library, I had to take the other kids out to dismissal and had a parent helper helping him search. Eventually, said shoe was found under the milk cooler in the cafeteria. It came off and instead of asking for help, he just kicked it under. Okay. When I was a baby teacher in the late 70s, we took our 1st graders to the cafeteria for afternoon milk break. They could buy milk and bring a snack. Students were assigned to clean floors and tables after the snack. This is not a long drawn-out story, but it was hilarious at the time. We'd been chatting, as teachers do, and looked over at the 1st grade cleaners to see their small arms wielding long mop handles back and forth on top of the tables to make their cleaning jobs easier. Not a bad idea, just mopping the tables. A kindergartner's mom would come in to have lunch with her daughter every day. The mom brought a plate, silverware, and napkins and would proceed to cut and feed her child every single bite. This child was not a special needs student. I'm sensing a theme here. This one is one line. It says, had a 6th grade girl bring Mike's hard lemonade in her lunch. Could you imagine? I had a student with challenging behavior. She was defiant and known to be a desk and chair flipper. One day, she refused to line up with the class for lunch, so I sent the class to lunch with the assistant and waited for her to either choose to follow or sit down with work. She started circling the room, pulling things off shelves. She then grabbed some scissors and she held them up in a threatening manner. The emergency call button was on the other side of the room, so I pulled out my cell phone to call for support. In that moment, she threw the scissors. I felt them whiz past my head. Admin arrived and took her to the office. She came back to the classroom a little after the rest of the class returned from lunch. She had a small toy and a bag of fruit snacks. The principal's response to me was, I can't believe you took your eyes off her. I had a kindergartner come back from lunch coughing. He went to blow his nose and blew neon orange snot everywhere. I was thinking, what the heck is wrong with this kid? I sent him to the nurse and she called a few minutes later. He had been stuffing Cheetos up his nose at lunch. That was an interesting phone call home. Someone sent in a story and said, it was my son. He loved to hunt and without me knowing, brought a squirrel to eat in his lunch. He didn't take the time to take the meat off the bone before he packed it, just the carcass. He proceeded to eat and even spit a pellet out. Pretty sure some kids still have PTSD over it. I have more, but this was the worst of the worst. Yeah, I can't imagine anything getting worse than that. Had an older elementary student bring a huge block of cheese for lunch. That's it. Also, a 3rd grader brought meatballs in a jewelry box. I had a student last year bring a bright orange Yeti martini shaker in one day. When I asked him where he got it, he told me he couldn't find his water bottle, so he took Mommy's special water bottle. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just told him to make sure she gets it back. I also had a boy a few years ago who'd bring in Nutter Butters. He had a peanut allergy. Mom told the nurse they're okay because peanuts and peanut butter aren't the same. Here's another one. We had a parent that would come in the cafeteria during breakfast and spoon feed her 2nd grade son. He was not special needs. The teacher told her that her son should be feeding himself. She still wouldn't listen and said, but he was her baby. Admin had to get involved. Oh, this is a good one. The cafeteria served a kind of trail mix one day. It had a large number of prunes in it. Many kids didn't eat it. There was lots of it in the trash. But there was a huge exodus of kids to the potty all afternoon, as those who did eat the prunes felt the effects. Teachers couldn't help but laugh. What were the district dietitians thinking? Poop breaks all afternoon long. I was supervising senior high lunch and 2 wrestlers were standing by the garbage can chewing saliva-inducing gum and spitting into the garbage can. They did this to cut weight. Right in front of kids who were eating. I told them to stop and they replied, "Well, where else are we supposed to spit?" I sent them to the locker room. Later, I told their coach what had happened. His reply, "Well, where else are they supposed to spit?" On first grade lunch duty, a student brought a container of white sugar in her lunch. Looked like about a 1/4 cup or so. Not an ingredient or a topping, not that that makes it any better, but just straight sugar that she poured into her mouth throughout the lunch period. A friend took a brownie from lunch, rolled it up to look like poop, and placed it in a boy's locker. That's actually really funny. Had a 5th grader lunge over me in the cafeteria to get to another kid and punched me in the head on the way over. His parent came in and told me to stay out of the way next time. Okay. I'll never forget this little boy in a pre-K class. All the kids were eating their lunch, talking, laughing. He slams his hands on the table, stands up and yells, "Poop is coming!" in such an exclamatory and worried tone, then runs to the bathroom. A few of my students are eating a snack, which our wonderful cook prepared for them. The snack was hummus and pita chips, all homemade. A little guy had a very distraught face as he was examining his snack. I asked him, "Buddy, you seem confused. What's wrong?" He says, "Nothing's wrong. I just don't like this snack." I say, "Oh, all right. Would you prefer the chips without the hummus?" He responds, "No, it all tastes like prison food." Literally did not know what to say. And I think that's where we'll end today. Thanks so much for being here for our Classroom Horror Stories Lunch Edition. If you have a story that you would like to be featured in our weekly horror story sharing, make sure to send it to me, either in the comments, email, however you want to. See you next week.